Good morning, everyone. If you're just joining, we're just going to give it a few minutes for a few more people to join in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Nick, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Camille Hoisington, and I'm Head of Strategic Projects at Traverse Connect. It's my pleasure to kick off our Creative Coast webinar series with today's webinar, Be a Better Business, How You Can Access Patagonia's Secret Sustainability Tools for Free. This webinar is one of 6 in the series to be held between now and the end of December. And the webinars are designed for the innovative mindset, focusing on entrepreneurship lessons for small businesses, startups, and creative freelancers. They are all free to attend and everyone is welcome. And you can check out the lineup at traverseconnect.com/events. Excuse me. So just to give you all a heads up, today's webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to the Traverse Connect YouTube page within 24 hours. So you can watch it again, or you can share it with your network and your friends. This webinar is being led by our guest speaker today, Nick Beadleston, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. Nick will speak for the first 45 minutes or so, and then there'll be time at the end for a Q&A. So to submit your questions, and please feel free to submit a question at any point during the webinar, you'll use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen, and your questions will be addressed. We'll try and get all of the questions addressed if possible at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'd like to introduce Nick Beadleston, and I'm just going to read out his bio. So Nick's raison d'etre is to support those businesses and industries which are awakening to their incalculable potential for social good, and as a result are pivoting towards service and sustainability as the new metrics of profitability. He has worked on business-led supply chain development initiatives on 6 continents, and to this day is haunted by the fact that he can't get penguins to buy fair trade. Nick is a founding partner at the niche consulting firm Good Impacts, which supports and guides small and mid-sized businesses on their mission-driven journey. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. Over to you.
Thanks, Camille. I have definitely not given up on working on a sustainability initiative in Antarctica. I think there's still time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. And I would ask for somebody to give me a thumbs up if they can see it. But in this webinar format, that's a little challenging.
I can see it, Nick.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, like everybody said, thanks for tuning in to Be a Better Business, how you can access Patagonia's secret sustainability tools for free. So we've likely all been attending a lot of webinars at this point, and they can get boring. They can get top down, and they can feel like an information dump. So let's not let that happen today. Let's commit to being engaged, to using the chat function at the bottom of your screen liberally, to asking questions throughout the presentation. Like Camille mentioned, we'll have a Q&A portion at the end, but if anything pops up along the way that's really germane to the slide or the topic at hand, please feel free to throw that in the Q&A function early. And let's just use that chat feature to share thoughts and ideas along the way, so this doesn't feel like a super boring lecture. So if this sounds like something you can all do, if you agree, please throw 1 down in the chat. If it doesn't seem like it's going to work for you, throw a 2 in the chat, or throw a 3 in the chat if you just want me to leave you alone while you eat your lunch. And we've also got a poll out there just to help continue to make this more of an active and participatory process. So feel free to submit answers to that. Just a short 2-question poll now, and then we'll do another one at the tail end of our conversation today. I'm going to vote. Cool. So this webinar, like Camille mentioned, is being presented by a couple of great community organizations, Traverse Connect and Creative Coast, both of which, as I'm sure you know, have some really excellent webinars coming up between now and the end of the year. So please take a chance to check those out and attend those as well. This webinar is also being presented by my small firm, Good Impacts. We provide a number of services for mission-driven businesses as well as nonprofits. We have a soft spot for forward-thinking nonprofits. But we help businesses work on everything from baselining your impacts, like we're going to be talking about today, all the way through creating and executing impact initiatives, and then, taking that journey all the way to creating systemic change within your industry. So please feel free to visit goodimpacts.com for more info on how we can help you along your mission-driven business journey. So in the spirit of continuing to keep everybody engaged and making this a participatory process, please put the name of your business and your mission statement, if you have one, down in the chat. Don't worry if you don't have a mission statement, just put who your business serves or why your business exists. Quick rundown on the agenda. We've already gone through the intro jazz. We're going to talk for a little bit about B Corps and the BLab organization. We're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about the B Impact Assessment, which is one of the free tools that we've been alluding to. Then we'll pivot a little bit and talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and what those mean for businesses. Then we'll talk about the Sustainable Development Goal Action Manager, which is similar to the B Impact Assessment tool, but distinct in a number of important ways. Then we'll save some time for Q&A, and we'll wrap it all up and talk about next steps at the top of the hour. So what are B Corps? How many folks are already familiar, at least somewhat familiar, with the concept of B Corps? I know I'm asking people to do a lot, but feel free to put a 1 in the chat if you've already heard of B Corps, if you're somewhat familiar with them, or throw a 2 in the chat if totally new concept. So certified B Corps are businesses that have elected to really balance purpose and profit. They're legally required of their own choosing to consider impacts when it comes to the decision making that their business makes on their workers, their customers, their suppliers, their community, their environment, their supply chain. And this is definitely a growing movement. There are about 3,600 registered B Corps around the world, more or less 1,200 of which are in the US. Not surprisingly, a lot of them are on the West Coast. Michigan has, I think, 20 some right now. Most states have a few. I think Alabama and Louisiana may be the only 2 states without B Corps. So this eclectic collection of companies with similar vision and values really do span across 50 some different industries and 74 countries, not the least of which is Afghanistan, which always blows my mind. They have a telecommunications B Corp. So I feel like with all the challenges in Afghanistan, if businesses there can put these sort of values forward, then nobody's got any excuse. So the bottom line when it comes to B Corp certifications, we know what matters gets measured. That's true for any kind of business. And what gets measured gets managed. So the B Corp certification, really at its simplest form, is a collection of tools and strategies to measure and manage those impacts, those positive community impacts that are critical for the way your business operates within the communities it serves. Here are some of the major brands you're probably already familiar with, which are B Corps. Patagonia, it's no surprise to anybody. Folks may or may not know that Kickstarter is also a B Corp. And Ben and Jerry's is a really interesting business case. Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield have been on the vanguard of many corporate-led environmental and social initiatives. They created a green team back in the late 1980s, early 90s, way before other businesses were starting to think about those sorts of environmental impacts and internalizing them within their companies. But when they were purchased in 2000 by Unilever, they'd already written so many of these values into their corporate documents, into their bylaws, into their really into their business foundation in such a way that that work continues today, despite the fact that they're a publicly traded company, which is a subsidiary of one of the world's biggest multinationals. So that is really the power of becoming a B Corp, and the B Corp certification is enshrining those values within some of the most fundamental parts of your business. A couple of other notable Michigan B Corps, folks are probably familiar with Brewery Vivant and Higher Grounds right here in Traverse City. That's Traverse City's only B Corp. And I'm pretty sure the only one north of Grand Rapids. So the B Corp certification really rests on 3 pillars, and that's verified performance, legal accountability, and public transparency. So there are different mechanisms that that B Corp certified businesses use to accomplish these, but essentially it looks like participating in the B impact assessment, which we're going to talk about, amending your governing documents requiring directors to balance profit and purpose, and then making that assessment score and subsequent recertification scores available through the B Corp's website. And so that publicly available information looks like what you see here up on your screen. So this is an example of Brewery Vivant's impact report. So you can see that their score is 110 out of a possible 200. So this is a pretty high score, even among most mission-driven progressive businesses. You need to achieve a minimum score of 80 to become a certified B Corp. And most businesses that don't participate in this process or haven't chosen to value social and environmental impact work normally score around that 50 percentile mark.
Hey, Nick, we're getting some messages that people can't see the score.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, everybody. I think my presenter notes were getting ahead of the actual presentation. So yeah, real quick recap. Brewery Vivant's got that overall impact score, which is a culmination of all of their impact areas. They've got a score of 110 out of a possible 200, which puts them in a pretty good category, even among B Corps. So the other publicly available information that you can see for every B Corp is a breakdown of their governance, workers, community, and environmental score. And then if you're interested, you can break those categories down even farther. Also publicly available are B Corp's previous impact scores, so you can see how they've changed over time. So as you would sort of hope and expect, it looks like when they started off, Brewery Vivant in 2014 was just a little bit above the threshold for being a certified B Corp. And then subsequently, they've really kicked it into high gear to the point where over on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that they were one of the best for the environment in 2019. So this is an annual competition that B Corp puts on to yeah, to appeal to the more competitive of their B Corp members. Oh, yep. And like I was mentioning, the viewing public can go ahead and open up those different impact areas and see how different companies have scored. So in order to get a B Corp certification, you have to complete the assessment. You have to meet any legal requirements by making changes to your bylaws. And this varies state to state. We'll talk about that a little bit more further down. But B Corp does have a handy tool to go and see what the legal requirements for your state are. And then you work virtually with BLabs to verify that all your answers are in fact true, that the documentation you've said exists, and then to make sure that your score at least exceeds 80 points. And then folks need to reassess every 3 years, although a lot of businesses that continue to make progress on some of these impact areas, they do it more than every 3 years because they do start to get competitive and they want to see that impact score rise to see their hard work reflected in that score. And then here's that legal requirement tool. As you can see, our state really doesn't have any legal measures or regulatory efforts around becoming a B Corp or becoming a benefit corporation. And we're one of only, I think, 4 states in the country to not have passed or to have legislation in the process of being passed. So yeah, go Michigan. So you've heard me mention BLabs, and BLabs is the nonprofit organization that's behind B Corp certification and the B Corp community. So they're the organization at the back of it all. They maintain all of the online resources. They do the auditing and really all of the organizing to keep that solidarity among registered B Corp businesses going. And as you saw, over 3,500 B Corps around the world from nearly 75 different countries requires a lot of coordination. BLabs got started back in 2006, and then the following year, they certified their first round of B Corps. And you can see how much they've grown in the past decade to be able to get that number to where it is. Every couple of years, they found it necessary to release a new version of their assessment, one which builds on knowledge from previous applicants. So the most recent version that was released in 2018 incorporates some of the Sustainable Development Goal information and objectives, like we'll talk about in a little bit. So one quick point of clarification that I'd really like to make, because it's confusing, is that B Corps and benefit corporations are not the same thing. Benefit corporation is a legal structure, just like an LLC or an S Corp. It's an optional structure that a business can pursue. And the legal requirements for said vary from state to state. And there is a requirement in every state with benefit corporations to report on the business's impacts, but they're really self-reported. There's no third-party certification. So B Corp, on the other hand, or B corporations, don't have an actual legal framework. They're a third-party certification. And this is way more information than I'm sure anyone needs right now, and the difference between the two. So there, like I mentioned earlier, there's 37 states, including DC, that legally acknowledge some form of benefit corporation, and another 4 states that have that legislation in progress. Unfortunately, Michigan is not one of them. New companies can incorporate as benefit corporations if legislation exists, and existing companies can elect to amend their bylaws and then change their corporate structure. The whole logic behind the benefit corporation exists to allow management, to give management the cover to pursue activities which don't directly maximize shareholder returns. And I say directly because there's a litany of data to support that engaging in social and environmental impact work ultimately strengthens companies and does maximize shareholder returns. But it sometimes requires short-term decision making away from profit maximization to make that kind of stuff happen. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, pre-IPO, post-IPO, there are mechanisms for businesses to become benefit corporations. And this is all fine and good, a little side rant. But while maximizing shareholder value is an accepted norm, there isn't actually a legal obligation for businesses to maximize shareholder value. There was a 1919 case, actually before the Michigan Supreme Court, Dodge versus Ford, that's often cited as precedent for this concept of maximizing shareholder value. But that was a really narrow ruling and was specifically about the legal duty of a controlling majority shareholder with respect to a minority shareholder. So it wasn't really about maximizing value, despite the fact that it's often cited as such. And I could continue to talk about this at length, but yeah, we've only got an hour and that's not what we're here for. But feel free to shoot me an email if you'd like to talk about it offline. So that's all fine and good. What about the free stuff? What we're here to talk about. So the B impact assessment is an assessment process of about 160 questions that measure a company's entire social and environmental performance. They evaluate how a company operates, how its business functions impact the people and places it serves. Like we saw earlier when we looked at Brewery Vivant's impact score, the assessment is broken down by governance, workers, community, customers, and environment, and then a series of disclosure questions, which really focus on things like, do you source your materials from a conflict zone? Have you had fatalities at your business in the past couple of years? And there are about 50 some disclosure questions. So that section normally goes pretty quickly, unless you fall into some of those high risk organizational areas. So while there is a cost to become a certified B Corp, the assessment tools are free to use and they're used by over 50,000 businesses. They take about 30 minutes if you just want to get a quick snapshot of where your business is at on various social and environmental impact issues. But taking the full assessment can be anywhere from a 1 to 3 hour process. There's a lot of clicking. Nope, we don't have that policy yet. Nope, we haven't decided how to handle that environmental challenge yet. So doing the assessment is not particularly strenuous. It's the work of coming up with all the things to meet those criteria later on where the real work comes in. And progress can be saved and returned to later, which is really convenient if you're trying to do the whole thing. So you can find the assessment by going to bcorporation.net. And while I love BLabs, their website is not the easiest to navigate. So you can find the assessments through the primary website, but I highly recommend going to bcorporation.net. And then that'll prompt you, if you don't already have an account, to go ahead and get started with the B Impact Assessment. Getting started really just entails filling out basic information to go ahead and create a profile. Once you do that, it's going to take you over to this backend portal. And yeah, you can see the dashboard over on the left-hand side. And then you can also see the B Impact Assessment about halfway down on that left-hand menu. It's also in the center of your screen. If you haven't logged in before or started any of this, your screen will look a little different. You won't have the SDG Action Manager, so it'll be even easier to get started. And like we talked about, the assessment is broken down into these 6 category areas. So you can see before you get rocking and rolling how many questions there are in each area. And there's only 3 questions in the consumer or in the customer section. That's a relatively recent add. So when you go into the individual modules, you'll be able to see how many questions you've completed so far and what your current score is. And yeah, so if you look down under mission and engagement, you'll see individual questions, which you will click on, and then it's going to give you an expanded view, which is going to look similar to this. Oh, gotcha. Not sure that my slides are advancing. Bear with me for just a second. Okay. Yeah, so this is an example of what one of the questions on the assessment will look like. So you can see there are a number of different options to choose from. Some questions are binary. We either have this policy or program in our company or we don't. But most of the questions are multiple choice, allowing you to indicate more than one answer, which ultimately improves your score based on the number of points that are available for that question. I don't have it on this slide because I've already completed the assessment, but you will, down where it says next, you'll also see a save button. It took me a while to figure this out, but definitely hit the save button for each question. So answer the question, hit save, return, and hit next to keep that progress moving forward. There's also that great function of being able to add comments or notes for you to refer back to later. So one of the really fantastic free tools that are part of this dashboard and the B Impact Assessment is the Goals tab down on about 3/4 of the way down on the left-hand dashboard menu. And this will allow you, based on how you filled out questions so far, this will allow you to look at different different goals and objectives that your business could complete to improve your overall score. So if you were to click on any of these, for instance, the environmental management systems, it's going to open up a window that looks like this, and it indicates not only what your previous answer was when you completed the question, but all the other answers, and then it allows you to set goals around achieving those other answers. So, for example, creating a policy statement documenting how your business is committed to the environment, all the way through undertaking an independent assessment to really verify your impact. Obviously, the notes are self-explanatory, and really nice feature is the ability to set a due date, which creates that accountability. Another fantastic feature is that you can export all of your answers for any of the impact areas into a spreadsheet. So if you like spreadsheets, there's that. And then you can go ahead and take a look at your overall impact score. So for example, you'll see here, this one says unverified because we're not currently pursuing the actual B Corp certification. We're just utilizing those tools. And then you can scroll down and break out each of those impact areas even further. So before we talk a little bit more about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the SDG Action Manager, are there any pressing questions that folks have?
Nick, it looks like someone has asked, what is the cost for being a B Corp?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. One of the great things about BLabs is that they operate, their certification operates on a sliding scale. So it really depends on your organization's overall revenue. So it can be as cheap as $500 up into, theoretically the tens of thousands of dollars if you're a multi-million dollar company. But I think for right around the 5 million revenue price range, it's about $2,000 a year. So you can do the math. That's pretty much a rounding error. It is worth noting that theoretically the certification cost, because it's on a sliding scale, will increase over time as your company revenue increases. So you should plan for it to cost more when you get recertified. All right, let's talk about some UN Sustainable Development Goals. How many folks are already familiar to some degree with the SDGs? Go ahead and put a 1 in the chat if you've seen these before, if you've heard of these, and feel free to put a 2 if this is your first time seeing them. And certainly no shame if these are not familiar. They're ubiquitous in a lot of European and South American countries, but they haven't really made it over to the US to the degree which I think we would have hoped. So these Sustainable Development Goals, commonly shortened to SDGs, are 17 interlinked goals that are designed to create a global sustainable future. And the UN defines sustainability essentially as meeting the needs of today without sacrificing the needs of tomorrow. So these goals were set in 2015 by the UN General Assembly, and they're normally referred to as Agenda 2030, because the goal is to achieve these goals by 2030. They're the next iteration of what were called the Millennium Development Goals, which were a miserable failure because they really lacked specificity. There was no measure for accountability. There wasn't great, the vision wasn't there. They essentially should have been called "How can Europe try and help the rest of the world" for a couple of years. So these SDGs are, while they're not without flaws, they're much more focused. They cover, as you can see, a variety of areas, everything through socioeconomic prosperity and equality through to environmental sustainability. And then, really looking at how economic growth and industry innovation can drive these other metrics of prosperity. So as you're looking at this list, I'd be really curious to hear from folks, what number SDG do you think would resonate the most with your business? And I think it's important to remember that these SDGs, these goals, are not just for the global South, the developing world. They're very much present, a lot of these, in Western countries and in the global North. So just to don't bother reading all this, but I put this up here to help showcase the level of specificity that comes with the goals and targets. So for these SDGs, they aren't just put out as broad statements. There are a number of sub-goals and criteria for meeting these larger goals. So the SDG Action Manager, which can also be found on your B Impact Assessment portal, is similar to, but not the same as, the B Impact Assessment. It's another great free tool for gauging your business's social and environmental impacts, and gives you a great way to prioritize what areas, if any, you feel it's appropriate for your business to work on. And this tool is really a great starting point, like I said, to figure out which of these sustainable development goals are the biggest priority for your organization. And it really helps start to get a sense of what risk your business and your model and your supply chain might be in if there isn't progress on some of these challenges within the next 10 years. And I think it's also important to not overlook the solidarity that participating in a process like this looks like. Trade is global, supply chains are global. So being connected to a global movement, a global community of mission-driven businesses that want to make progress on these critical social and environmental challenges can be really powerful and really cohesive for your organization, for your employees, for your customers, for the communities that you operate within. And just a quick clarification, the B Impact Assessment and the SDG Action Manager aren't the same thing. They share about 35% of the same questions, and a convenient feature is that if you complete the questions in one, you don't have to complete it in the other. But the goal of the B Impact Assessment is for a company to receive that overall score, either to make improvements internally, just for the sake of being a better and more engaged business, or with the goal of pursuing a certification, the BCorp Certification. The SDG Action Manager is more around getting a baseline and scores on those specific sustainable development goals. So you can find the SDG Action Manager in the general menu for bcorp.net. It can be a little challenging to find, but once you are rocking and rolling in that direction and have clicked on that, it will bring you to some screens that should look pretty familiar to when you registered for the impact assessment, just basic info. At that point, it's going to start showing up whenever you log in. And at that point, you can log in either to the B Impact Assessment or the SDG Action Manager. They'll both take you to the same home screen. So first and foremost, with this assessment, everyone needs to complete the baseline assessment of 25 questions. And unlike with the B Impact Assessment, you'll see that the other modules, all 17 Sustainable Development Goal modules, are locked until you complete that baseline of 25 questions. And that process shouldn't take more than 20 or 30 minutes tops. Yeah, so you can see here how some of those questions start to break down. Really similar themes: stakeholder engagement, corporate citizenship, so on. And so here's an expanded view of one of those questions. You'll notice it looks really similar to the B Impact Assessment. You have the option of, a couple of different answers. And then it will show you down below that this particular question can also be found in the B Impact Assessment. So if you complete it here, you don't have to complete it there. It also shows up in the 16th module of the Sustainable Development Goal Action Manager. So again, if you complete it here and you choose to complete that 16th module later to focus on that SDG, your work's already done, at least for one question. So once you go ahead and complete that short baseline assessment, then it opens up the rest of the modules. And if this is something that you and your business are going to pursue, I would suggest really focusing on a few to start. Many of them are interconnected, and you can actually see here by filling out the baseline assessment, a few of the questions in these other modules have already been answered. So in a perfect world, everybody would focus on all of them, but I would highly encourage picking a small handful of the ones that seem the most important to you, to your business, to your team, and really focus on that. A whole litany of information is available once you start to complete these modules. Really interesting is the risk level and looking at how your current performance or lack thereof on these different SDGs could be putting your organization at risk. Most likely for a lot of these around supply chain disruptions. So in the same way that you can go on and get certified as a B Corp, you can also go and join the UN Global Compact. It's a similar but much easier process. There is no overall audit that needs to happen. You essentially just need to send a letter to the UN saying, yep, we're behind this, and then pay an annual fee. I think in the US for corporations for businesses below $1 million, I think it's a voluntary donation. I'm sure they have a suggested amount, but yeah, for businesses of that size, they're not looking to create a huge financial barrier. Yeah, I have talked nonstop for the past, holy cow, 45 minutes. So I would love to hear from everybody. What questions are there?
Nick, are you able to see our Q&A button?
That'd be great, huh?
We have 2 questions in there thus far.
Yeah, give me just a second. All right. So somebody's indicated that it's been shared with them that if a company revenue is between 50 and 80,000, that it's not financially worth being a B Corp. Are there many small firms or companies that are B Corps? Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'm not entirely sure what we mean by worth being a B Corp. When it comes to the value generated by being a B Corp, the certification's nice. Being able to put the stamp, the logo on your website, it's great. It's nice to be able to send out that press release. But having those tools for accountability and having a framework for accountability, and then belonging to a cohort of like-minded businesses, I think is really where the value's at. As we saw, if there are 50,000 businesses using these free tools and only about 3,500, 3,600 who actually pursue the certification, yeah, many more people are beginning to make progress on these issues than just certifications alone would reflect. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at the tools, regardless of if you think certifications in your future, now or ever. There's no reason to let paying for an audit and a certification stand in the way of starting to have those internal conversations around your company's impacts and how you can start to improve them. There's a great question. Are there any grants available to help offset the cost of the application process? That is a really good question, which I embarrassingly don't have an answer to. But please feel free to shoot me an email, nick@goodimpacts.com. And I'm definitely going to look into that, because I have been wondering what's available. This program is designed for-profit organizations, which kind of limits the grant funding that's available. But I'm sure that they are out there. BLabs is also really flexible in their certification cost process. They're not really upfront about this for obvious reasons, but I've seen them exercise a high degree of flexibility with how that assessment cost gets covered. And then there was another question about SDG success stories and examples. Yeah, there are tons of them. I would definitely recommend, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm gonna share the URL for the Sustainable Development Goal website. Because they have not only a whole litany of resources, but some really, really motivational, and some great music. Yeah, some really motivational stories of big and small companies that have embraced these SDGs, and how they've started to see it transform their business. I will say less on the Sustainable Development Goal side and more on the B Corp side. I've worked with a number of really phenomenal B Corps. And one that always sticks out in my mind is a coffee roaster with regional and here before too long nationwide distribution down in Florida. And I remember going to their warehouse, walking through their packaging area where folks are putting the roasted coffee into bags and boxes to ship all over the country, and asking them about the impact work that this business was engaged in. And I was really surprised at the level to which warehouse employees could articulate the social and environmental impact work of this business. Taught me something about having preconceived notions, but it was really exciting for for warehouse staff to be able to talk about what their business was doing, certainly within their own community, but also in South and Central America at some of the very farthest reaches of their supply chain. And this is a business that has really internalized those impacts. They've really made it a part of their culture. It's built in, not just bolted on. And because that's the case, they have a very high B Corp score. They score, or they rank as part of the world's best pretty much every single year. And their turnover rate is crazy low for essentially a food service business. So yeah, it definitely happens. I'm going to take a look over at the comments and see if there are any other questions. Oh yeah, great one about the assessments and the reassessments. So yeah, it is BLab and BLab employees that do that assessment process. So essentially you submit all the documents, they're doing it all virtually right now. And there's some back and forth. And it's really not a binary thing unless you want it to be. If they find that something's lacking or that you don't quite hit that 80%, they will really work with you to help get you to that minimum, to make those changes within your organization. So unlike some certifications, like an organic certification, for example, it's not, if you miss it now, too bad on the money and come back again in a year. There's a lot of collaboration on this. So another person used to work at a B Corp, but not all of the employees really understood what that meant and why the business was taking time to focus on that. So their question is how businesses can spread the word, not just to their customers and the communities that they serve, but also to their employees. Yeah, if you're going through the work of getting certified and paying the fee, you absolutely want your employees to be engaged. You want your entire team to be engaged. Like I mentioned with that Florida-based company, they have a major celebration every year. I think they get reassessed every year by choice. But yeah, they make it a collaborative effort. They make it something worth celebrating. And they also create opportunities for all of their employees to participate in the process. Not unlike any other sort of lean or continuous improvement process. They've worked hard to engage their entire staff and to make them a part of the process rather than to just let them know after the fact, here's a thing that happened. Any other questions?
It looks like we have one more question in the Q&A box.
Can a customer find out the important information regarding the actions of a B Corp that they support, like Patagonia or King Arthur Flour, a huge B Corp? So there is definitely information that's available on the bcorporation.net. You can look at all of the information that we talked about earlier. It'll talk about different areas of their impact score. Most B Corps, and particularly larger ones, will release an annual impact report. It's not a requirement for B Corp certification, and there are many companies that aren't B Corps that release an impact report, but it is a really phenomenal practice. Again, if you're going to go through all the work of assessing and planning and changing and improving these things within your organization, it absolutely behooves you to put together a report, to hire a firm to put together a report, to make that information available. And I don't want to make any more work for anybody, but if you have questions about a B Corp's operational strategy or procedures, reach out to them. They elected to participate in this process because it matters to them. So yeah, ask them questions. And I imagine most of them would be only too happy to engage in that conversation.
Nick, thank you again so much. It looks like we don't have any more questions and we're finishing up right on time, which is great. So a reminder to everyone that's listening that we've been recording this webinar, so we'll post it onto the Traverse Connect YouTube page within 24 hours. And then also a reminder just to check out the other webinars that we have coming up between now and December. You can just go to traverseconnect.com/events.
One quick plug. Well, actually, I say so much during public speaking. So if you want to engage in a fun drinking game, drink every time I say when you're watching the recording.
That sounds really fun.
On a serious side, please do reach out, visit goodimpacts.com, shoot me an email, nick@goodimpacts.com. If you have additional questions on using these tools, even if you're not interested in pursuing the full certification, we have so many templates that are available, and yeah, we're prepared to help walk folks through any of this process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. And thank you everyone who was able to join today.